Hello, and welcome to Our Wellness at Work, the show that discusses the importance of individual wellness with the goal of normalizing the conversation about personal wellness in all areas of someone's life and workplace. I'm your host, Trent Williams, and today we're going to talk about what's in store for listeners of this show and a preview of topics which will be covered in the next several episodes. We will also discuss an overview of the ins and outs of workplace mental health and offer listeners a special tool to add to their toolbox that can be used every day. So be sure to listen all the way through, or at least skip to the end for the details. Stick around, and we'll be right back.
I shouldn't seek help because I don't have the money for it.
I've had help before and it didn't really make
I'm feeling shameful of what I'm going through.
I've never needed help.
How do I know that
I
you won't tell somebody?
Everybody has hard times.
I should just
My boss will find they're going to judge me.
Everyone has their reasons why they can't come forward when they're struggling in life. I'm here to give you reasons why you can. It's not just because we're part of your benefits package, and it's not just because we're professional and confidential. It's because you know your word is your bond. It gives you credibility on the job site and integrity at home. It's why you can be trusted. That word, trust, is our bond. When you or someone you care about is going through a tough time, it's what you need to hear most. So hear it from us.
Trust that we care.
Trust that we are one of you.
Confíen que nosotros estamos aquí para ustedes.
Trust that your story is safe with us.
Trust that no one you don't allow
No one
will know.
Trust that we know what a work day is.
How hands get dirty.
why integrity in the things you make matters.
Most of all, trust that we have been there.
And we can help.
We are here for you to trust.
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 Confiar.
Trust.
And it starts with me. I'm in behavioral health now, but before that, I worked architectural sheet metal, roofing, and siding most of my life. And that spirit runs through my blood, starting with my dad and his dad before him. And they all made a living with their hands. A world where you don't talk about things like mental health. You don't talk about your emotions. You don't talk about your feelings, and you definitely don't ask for help. I know what it's like to have that pride and thick skin and yet still be suffering. I know how terrifying even thinking about making that phone call is. And I also know that your word is your bond. And our word to you is trust. It's not an easy thing to do to ask for help, but it's a necessary thing to do. Welcome back, and thanks again for joining us. In this podcast, I am actually joined today by my lovely daughter, Bella. Bella, say hi.
Hi.
Bella is going to be not only my sound technician and someone helping me with timing today, but she's also going to be my hype person. And she may say things like,
"That's crazy.
And
No way."
just to hammer the point down for our listeners. So thanks for that, Bella. All right. So in this podcast, we are not going to shy away from any difficult topics. Instead, we will dive deeper into those topics to find answers and insight into how we live our lives from day to day. We will also share personal stories, both from hosts and guests alike. And we will talk to a variety of individuals that may include experts in the fields of behavioral health, medical professionals, business owners and business managers from various businesses and trade unions, diet and nutrition experts, legal experts, financial experts, and the list goes on and on. We're talking about personal wellness. There is a spectrum of what those areas are for personal wellness. So we're going to be talking about all those topics and really how you can find and strike a balance in your own life and then help those around you to create the most happy and healthy workplace and home life for our listeners. As a side note, if you are interested in being considered as a guest for a future show, please fill out the guest form from the link that is found in the description of this episode. And for those of you who are listening on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you can be notified of any new episodes as they come in. But before we dive into the meat of the episode, we are going to start with the practice of gratitude. So for those of you who have some experience in the behavioral health field, specifically in addiction recovery, they talk about the importance of gratitude and how that can actually set your mind and set your framework in the right direction for the day if you start this as a morning habit that you continue to add to each and every day. The interesting thing about gratitude is when you are grateful, it draws your attention to positive things in your life. When you are drawing your mind to positivity, it will create a leaning towards positivity in your own way of thinking and bring up positive emotions, even if they are only momentary. We are able to think ourselves into feeling a certain way. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about that today. We'll unpack that in future episodes, but today we are going to start with gratitude. May sound corny or cliche, but there is transformative power in the practice of gratitude. Practicing gratitude not only sets your mind on a positive course for the day, but it assists in turning your eyes away from yourself and instead looking towards other people. It's hard to be selfish and grateful, and I mean truly grateful at the same time. It's hard for those things to coexist together. So by being grateful, we are creating a positive mindset, a positive framework for our lives and for our day. We are turning our eyes away from ourselves, which, a lot of times we can get stuck in the low self-confidence, low self-esteem, negative self-talk that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis. This helps to take our eyes away from that navel gazing and look towards other people to provide opportunities or to be aware of opportunities in which we can support and assist and show kindness to those around us. This practice can be done as soon as you open your eyes in the morning before you get out of bed. So I challenge all of you listeners to try it tomorrow morning. Before you get out of bed, list 3 to 5 things that you are grateful for that day. Say them to yourself, write them in a journal or a notebook, send yourself an email or a text message, or share the list with a close friend or relative. Some days may be genuinely difficult to find something to be grateful for, like when your relationships are in tatters, when you have been let go or laid off from a job, if you're in legal or financial trouble, struggling with addiction, suffered grief and loss, or in the throes of deep depression or anxiety, gratitude may seem like the furthest thing from your mind in those moments. On those days, being grateful for the air in your lungs may be all that you can muster in those circumstances. And that's okay. It's okay to have those days where you struggle to be grateful. It's the only thing you have to be grateful for is that you woke up that day. And it's okay to have those days, but it's a known fact in psychology that our brain's negative emotional response is much faster than the positive response. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. If you are browsing through news stories. So we all know that the climate for news right now is very potent and that there are lots of strong messaging that can trigger an emotional response from us, and not always and usually not in a positive way. So you may be reading the news for the day to start your morning, have your cup of coffee, reading through the news, and you see a news story about the most recent, crisis or tragedy, something that triggers a oppositional attitude or oppositional response. For example, if a article was written about an opposing political viewpoint, that may trigger a negative emotion that seems to rise up out of nowhere. So when we are looking at pictures that trigger that negative, whether it be actual pictures or through an article or just the way that we direct our own thinking, when it is on a negative image or a negative topic, those emotions rise to the surface far faster than positive emotions. This has been studied, this has been tested, and it is the basis behind the algorithms for social media. So that's a whole topic for a separate day. The algorithms that track our movements on social media and on the internet actually recognize that negative emotions get a faster response and faster action and more consistent action from the individuals using those services rather than the positive. So most of what social media puts in front of people, those negative images or those topics that trigger a strong negative response. And so So again, some days may be genuinely difficult, and that's okay. But today we're going to talk about the things that we are grateful for. And I'm going to ask my daughter Bella to share some things she's grateful for here in a moment. But some of the things I'm grateful for, again, I'm grateful for my family. My background I'll talk about in just a moment. But I am grateful each and every day to be home with my family and to see them each morning, and to just really have that closeness with them. I'm thankful for the work I get to do every day. So I'm the executive director for an organization called Team. We are an employee assistance program and patient advocacy program. I'll talk a little bit later about what that means, but I get to devote my career to helping other people, helping to break down stigma when it comes to wellness, specifically in the areas of mental and emotional health, but also in physical health, diet, nutrition, and the list goes on. Breaking down that stigma, really normalizing these types of conversations. And I'm thankful that I get to do that each and every day. Bella, what are you thankful for?
I'm thankful for my family, my friends, my pets, and like my school.
That's awesome. Those are good things to be grateful for. Thank you, Bella. So again, gratitude is just a great way to start your day. It may seem again corny or cliche or even trite when you're waking up in the morning, but getting into that habit and revisiting that habit throughout the day can really help to reframe your thinking, reframe your self-talk, and just be one of many tools that can help you cope with the challenges of everyday living. In this podcast, we are not going to shy away from difficult topics. In fact, we're going to dive deeper into those topics, knowing that on the other end, once we go through the weeds in each of these topics, on the other end, the hope is that you will walk away with deeper insight, different perspective, but a increased awareness of the importance of these topics, and then actual concrete skills and tools that you can use to address these issues or address these areas of wellness in your own life. So I'm going to practice what I preach and talk a little bit about my stories. Again, I'm the executive director for Team. Team is a employee assistance and patient advocacy program, and we work primarily with various trade unions. Not exclusively with trade unions, but we work with a variety of different occupations, trades, and various employment sectors. And those we'll talk a little bit later as we talk about what's to come in the future. So again, we do a lot of behavioral health case management, crisis response, critical incident response, whether that's through suicide, through a fatality on a job site, sudden passing of a beloved crew member. These are the types of things that we support with mental health professionals, medical professionals. Through our patient advocacy services, we also help people navigate the complex and fast-paced world of healthcare, helping them to dissect and understand their discharge paperwork or their doctor's orders, help them to get a second opinion if they need to with a complex medical condition. We provide complex case management, both for medical and behavioral health. And then we also have an integrated care approach in which we know that rarely do problems happen in a silo where somebody is dealing with mental health only and doesn't also have comorbid physical health conditions that are closely tied to that, and then vice versa. Often when somebody's dealing with a medical issue, there is, whether situational or long lasting, there is often a mental health or behavioral health component, specifically when it comes to difficult health diagnoses. We don't think about the mental health component when it comes to receiving a cancer diagnosis, but we all know on some level that there is a emotional weight and mental health component to processing that, not only for yourself, but for a family member. When you have been diagnosed with cancer, how do you have that conversation with your kids? How do you support a family member who's been given that diagnosis? How do you deal with the financial strain and the anxiety and the depression and other things that can come with that diagnosis? So we are going to talk about a lot of that throughout these episodes of this podcast. And we're going to talk about, how to cope and process and what resources that you can get to and learn a lot along the way. So I actually got my start in the construction industry. So I worked architectural sheet metal roofing and siding for better part of 10 years. I got my start in construction. I grew up in a family where my dad worked manual labor his whole life and actually owned a subcontracting firm that I worked for a number of years. And we grew up in a house where, you worked hard, you played hard, but we didn't talk a lot about our emotions. We didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about mental health. We didn't really talk about the best ways to care for your physical health. And wellness wasn't just a focus of our conversations, and that's nobody's fault in general. It's just generationally, that's my parents came from families that didn't talk about those things, and therefore no one had an example of what to talk about and what is normal. But our goal here with this podcast and with what team does day in and day out is to try and break down that generational stigma and break that chain and really flip the script to normalize these conversations and focus on the importance of having these types of conversations. So again, I got my start in construction. It was not until my own family, we went through our own crises, and I was in a position where I was the only breadwinner of the family. I was the only income at this time. We went through a crisis when my youngest daughter was born premature and had to spend a number of days in the special care nursery, or the NICU, which is really the ICU for infants. At that same time, my oldest daughter, Bella, was actually staying with my mom, and we got a call that said she was having trouble breathing. She was very sick. What we found out later is she had pneumonia, and her breathing had actually, her oxygen saturation had dropped down to 72%. For those of you know, some of you may know what that means. For those of you who don't, it was very serious. Wasn't getting a lot of oxygen. In fact, she was unresponsive on the way to the hospital. So for about a week, we had both kids for a number of days, we had both kids in the same hospital at the same time in different wings. And my wife and I basically went back and forth, trading off on which child we were going to be with at any given moment, knowing that it was pretty serious for both of our kids. Now, I just got to say, obviously Bella's fine because you heard her today. And my other daughter, my youngest daughter, Joanna, is doing great. So I want to preface all of this with that. But through that time, it was difficult, and I had to go back to work to provide for my family and try and navigate these challenges. And I luckily had somebody who knew me well enough, who I trusted, who had established that relational trust with, who knew enough to pull me aside, didn't know what was going on, but could tell that I wasn't my usual self, throwing jokes around, zingers on the job site. I seemed very distracted, not present, and that something was on my mind. And so they cared enough and knew enough about me to pass on resources for us to call an organization much like Team that provides counseling services for employees. I, made that first phone call, lasted about 10 minutes, was super awkward. Hadn't really done much of that before, but that led to another call. At the end of that call, they asked me, comparing the beginning of this call to now, do you feel better or worse? Simple question. Answer was better. And then they asked me if I wanted to schedule another call. And I did. This led to more counseling. This led to family counseling at all levels of our family, and also to my career change. And so during this time, I realized there was a big hole when it comes to mental health and just even talking about emotions in general in the construction industry. There was a missing piece that needed to be addressed. It is just as important today as it was back then. In fact, I would argue that it's more important, since over the last 10 years in the construction industry, the rate of suicide has gone up 30% in the last decade. Now is the time that we can really normalize these conversations. I made a change. I wanted to build in a different way, to give back in a different way. And I made the decision to step out of the construction industry in the form of what I was doing, and instead go back to school for a counseling degree. I worked in many different settings, hospital settings, addiction treatment settings, as case management, care coordination, resource coordination, program manager, program director at a number of different organizations before I ended up at Team, which Team, again, we work directly with construction unions as well as retail food, hospitality, and a number of different sectors of business. But all of it hovering around this mission and vision to have mental health awareness and these types of conversation, not just mental health awareness, but also physical health, wellness, financial, legal, have these things that are typically seen as taboo conversations that you don't have with everybody. And that's a safe thing that we do for ourselves, is to decide who we can trust with that story and with those parts of our lives. But to normalize that in a way where we watch out for each other in the workplace, that we notice when somebody next to us is struggling, and to reach out to them in a small way, in a big way, depending on that relationship, maybe in just a way to point them, like somebody pointed me in the direction of an organization, much like Team, or another organization, if that's what one of our listeners, what some of our listeners may not have Team as a benefit. And so finding those resources that your organization or your company does provide. And then if you want more help with those resources, absolutely reach out to Team and we can help direct you on where to go. And so with that, when we talk about personal stories, we're really talking about vulnerability. And those of you who've heard of Brene Brown, as she would say, we need to have the courage to own your own story. Have the courage to own not just the parts of your life story that we all selectively choose when telling people, and they say, tell me a little bit about yourself. We selectively choose the parts we want to talk about. Not only talking about those parts, but talking about the difficult parts. The parts that we don't like to think about, the parts that we try to avoid at all costs because we think that opening up and talking about those things is actually going to hurt us more or leave us vulnerable to ridicule or more pain. A lot of times our family patterns from when we were younger have created this sense of, if I talk about this, I'm only going to be hurt more. So why talk about it at all? And again, that's one of the lies that we tell ourselves. And so again, vulnerability in order to talk about our stories, not just from a mental health, emotional health standpoint, but vulnerability to talk about physical health concerns, to get those resources and to get pointed in the right direction. Vulnerability to talk about diet and exercise and our challenges, our struggles, our successes, all of those things rolled into one. Talking about legal issues and how do we get out of legal trouble, or, how do we prepare for the passing of an elder parent? These are things that are inevitable in our lives. Death is inevitable. So welcome to this podcast. We're going to say things like death is inevitable, but it is. And so talking about and preparing for some of these more challenging things that show up in our lives so that we have the confidence to face them and the resources provided to assist us and give us the best chance of success throughout the whole process. So I'm excited about this podcast. This is something new for Team. This is episode 1. So we won't be digging too deep into these topics today, but we're going to do a flyover. You get to know me. I'd love to get to know you. Again, if you want to share your story or be considered to be a guest on this show, please fill out the form that's down in the description. We'll reach out and start that conversation. So looking ahead, everything is going to have the key foundational elements. So every topic, every guest, every relationship that we highlight is all going to have the foundation of trust and safety. Now, those of you who know me and have heard me speak before know I talk about this often, how trust and safety go hand in hand. When you meet somebody in a business setting, there is a reason that you shake their hand at the beginning and at the end of a meeting. Now, I know we've all gotten a little bit creative with how we do that, whether it's the elbow bump or the fist bump during the COVID pandemic, but we all know that physical contact, it means something. And if you actually get down on the chemical scale of what's going on there, you are actually, by having that physical contact, by shaking their hand, by looking them in the eyes, you are actually creating a chemical process in your brain that the experience and safety of trust. You're building trust. In fact, the chemical that is used in that moment is called oxytocin, and it has actually been nicknamed the trust chemical. And so there's no mistake that it's been named that. And we're going to talk about how that allows you to feel safe with somebody. You know, when you go on a first date, for example, it's awkward. You're trying to interview the other person. They're interviewing you. You're making judgments throughout the whole process. Do I like this person? Do I not? Is this person funny? Are they not funny? Throughout that process, you are, whether you realize it or not, deciding and developing a relationship that you can either move towards trust or realize that this person is not somebody that I should trust. I don't feel safe sharing things with this person. It's no different than relationships in a workplace in that regard. As you get to know your coworkers, as you get to know the people sitting around you, you are developing a deeper relationship. Knowing somebody's story, hearing their experiences allow you to connect with your own story in various ways. Subsequently, then feel that connection with that other person. And so really having that courage to own your story and how trust and safety go hand in hand. And it's no different in the workplace. Construction, I'll use that as an example for a moment. You need to trust that the people around you on the job site every day are going to keep you safe. You need to trust that harness that you're wearing when you're tied off, that you're going to stay tied off and that harness is not going to fail when you need it the most. You know, you need to be able to trust that the equipment isn't going to fail. And, you know, the list goes on and on. That trust and safety really go hand in hand. And it's no different with wellness topics. If you're working in a kitchen, you know, you need to be able to trust that the other individuals in that kitchen are going to warn you when there's something hot behind you so you don't turn around and burn yourself. You need to be able to trust that they're going to notify you when they have a knife that they're holding so that you don't walk into it. And usually there's warnings that are shouted out. You know, I worked a number of years in a kitchen and know that if you hear somebody yell hot, that you don't want to turn around quickly or take a step in any direction. You need to just wait until they pass. So when we're talking about some of these health topics, that same kind of trust and safety plays into this. And we'll talk a lot about how in a workplace, mental health, physical health, wellness in general can sometimes and often be a team sport, meaning that this idea of addressing mental health, addressing wellness, it is a great solo venture, but an even better team venture. And what I mean by that is we are relational by nature. You know, we are not meant to be islands, and that the way that we get through something, you know, or get over something, you know, a lot of times when people talk about, oh, I'll get over it or they'll get over it, the ways that we get over something, and I would argue that it's not getting over it, it's actually going through it. The way that we go through something is actually by talking it through, having that reflected back to us, and then connecting the appropriate emotional response to what it is that we are going through. And so we're going to learn how we can help each other to do that in an appropriate way in a workplace, and how we can get to resources, connected to resources that can help in the long run. So as we look ahead, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start a 4-part series that addresses family of origin, talking about family dynamics as it relates to the family that we grew up in. In each of these episodes, we will unpack the family of origin and discuss how our upbringing and the roles that we each played in our families as children contributed to how we manage and process emotions. Also, how we show up or don't show up in our relationships today. Family dynamics and relationships from the past have created the lenses in which we approach a problem, deal with conflict, accept compliments and kindness. Also, how we moderate our emotions, how we cope with stress, how we cope with fear, sadness, trauma, or a number of other difficult emotions or feelings, and how those experiences from our childhood and those relationships from our childhood and the roles that we played in the families as we were growing up really still show up and set the framework for how we face the world today. So understanding our childhood and our roles that we played in the immediate family as kids is a crucial first step in building a foundation to address mental health, emotional health, relational health, physical health as well, depending on how those conversations occurred and what was normal or not normal in family relationships as well. So for example, you know, somebody who is adamantly against a specific medical procedure and shares that with their children, oftentimes you'll see that child then adopt that as their own viewpoint and their own way to approach those situations. Now it goes a lot deeper than that, and we'll start talking about that during that 4-part series. During this series on family dynamics and roles, we will highlight 3 types of family dynamics. the three family dynamics that we will talk about: healthy families, troubled families, and dysfunctional families. So we'll talk about all three of those. There is no one definition for every single family. Usually families will ebb and flow in and out of each of these three types of family dynamics, but we'll unpack each of those in a little bit more detail during a 4-part family series starting next episode. We will also discuss the various roles that each individual played in their family of origin. These roles include the hero. The hero is often the eldest or only child. We'll talk about what the characteristics of that individual. The rescuer, which is often the less dominant spouse or one of the children. The scapegoat, and the scapegoat's usually a target chosen by the family to distract from the real issues or problems of the family. Typically they do that in a troubled or dysfunctional family. And then we have the lost child, which is often the youngest child. They're quiet, reserved, withdrawn. And we'll talk about a little bit about why that individual is in that type of role and what risks accompanying that type of role, along with all the other roles that we talk about as well. The final role for a family we'll talk about is the mascot. This is typically the family clown, uses humor to keep everyone positive and seemingly happy. In an unhealthy or troubled or dysfunctional family, I should say, they are doing this to distract the family from the real problems or to try and break the tension of conflict. So we'll look at each of these roles from a healthy family, a troubled family, and a dysfunctional family perspective and highlight the strengths and challenges of each. We will also equate each role and personality type to possible career paths that individuals end up in based on their family roles, and how you can take some of those things that maybe were used as a deflection, used as a defense to keep people away, or trying to use it as a glue to hold a family together, how those are actually very useful skills. And if worked through the process of owning your story and talking through this, understanding what role you played in your family and how that affected you and brought you to where you are today can actually be used to your advantage to further your career, to better your relationships, and to just overall live a healthy, productive, and happy life. But sometimes it means going to the dark places before you get to the light on the other side. We're going to talk about those roles, what that actually means. And again, this is a foundation. Understanding our childhood, for better or for worse, actually helps us to understand how we deal with issues that come up in our day-to-day lives as adults. And so grasping that, understanding that, owning that, and then connecting the emotions to those experiences. So for all of you who are listening, there is nothing in your life that has happened to you that is meaningless. And what I mean by that is, if you've had tragedy in your life, I want to be cognizant of that as I'm talking. Somebody listening today may be struggling with thoughts of suicide. And I want you to know that you are not alone. There is help. You have caring people that will want to talk to you and want to hear your story. What you are going through is not meaningless. What any of you are going through, if you're going through something difficult right now, it is not meaningless. It is difficult. I am sad that you are in that position or that you went through that, but that has contributed to who you are today, which can be a really hard pill to swallow when you're thinking of things where harm has been inflicted on you and it wasn't your choice. That can be a difficult thing to think about, how that incident, I'm thinking in terms of incidents of child abuse and things like that are just horrifying and tragic. Those also have contributed to how you face the world and to who you are today, and understanding that and connecting that with the emotional response that you maybe couldn't have experienced or that your own brain protected you from in those moments. Understanding those in a compassionate and safe environment is a way to catapult your healing process and understanding of how you can cope with these things in your day-to-day life. And again, turning it into a strength where you can embrace it as part of your character and part of what made you who you are today, and taking what you can from that, putting the difficult things aside and really getting through that, not getting over it. So other topics that we are going to cover, we'll talk about as soon as we come back from a quick break. Stick around because we still have to give you that tool for your toolbox that we're going to give everybody at the end of the episode. Stick around and we'll be right back. Hi, right. This is the host of the Our Wellness at Work podcast, Trent Williams. I want to thank you again for tuning in today and let you know that if you are interested in having your organization be a sponsor of our show, I want to give you an opportunity to reach out to us. Or if you are a listener and you want to find out more information about Team Wellness at Work and what it is that we offer and how we can help your organization, please go to startwithteam.com. Again, startwithteam.com. Whatever your health concern, whether you are looking for counseling for you or your family member, whether you need to get set up with a primary care physician, get set up for a physical, find that second opinion for a difficult health diagnosis, or if you just want to find out general information, again, that website is startwithteam.com. If you are a listener that is covered by our benefit, you can also go to that website to fill out an inquiry to get set up with a counseling appointment in one of our offices or a virtual appointment with one of our counselors or nursing case managers. Again, startwithteam.com. We also have a toll-free number, 1-800-634-7710. Again, that's 1-800-634-7710. And we look forward to speaking with you soon, and we'll get back to the show right now. Welcome back, and thanks again for joining us. Before the break, we got a preview of our first series topic of the show, which will be in the realm of mental, emotional, and relational wellness. But this podcast will cover more than just those areas of personal wellness. So looking ahead, we believe in a holistic approach to wellness in which each area of personal wellness is addressed and cared for to varying degrees, and that is to give a person the best chance at health and happiness. So if you find that balance or address each of them to varying degrees, you set yourself up and you can help other people be set up for their best chance at health and happiness and wellness in their own lives. It makes it a little bit easier. You have a firm foundation underneath your feet when facing challenges if you are already addressing these things in your life. So don't wait for crisis to happen. Don't wait for health to deteriorate. These are things that you could be proactive. We're all about proactivity at Team. We're there for the reactive crisis when something happens and somebody reaches out to call us, but we're also very much focused on the proactive piece, that preventative care, or at least equipping yourselves and your workplace with the tools needed to address those as they come up. Now, when I talk about the workplace, I should mention too that addressing wellness is not just a fringe benefit or something nice you do for your employees. This is actually something that will benefit your organization and your business by increased productivity, a decrease in absenteeism, a decrease in unnecessary turnover, and just a safer working environment where people are focused on the job at hand and not distracted by as many or any outside issues or crises that they're facing. You know, we all want to believe that we can leave it at the door and that when we start our workday, that those problems, those difficult things that we're experiencing in our lives, we can just compartmentalize that or push it aside, leave it at the door. But the reality is that that's very, very difficult to do. And often those thoughts are intrusive, whether we want to turn them off or not. And so really understanding that this is something that will not only make your environment at your organization safer, but will help you to get a return on investment for years to come as you are developing lifelong employees, loyal employees that know that their employer is invested in them, not just invested in their work output, but invested in them as the person that they are holistically in order to foster that person and give them the opportunity to shed all of those unnecessary distractions and burdens throughout the day and focus on the job at hand and focus on what they do best, honestly, which is to provide for their families in a stable job with those benefits attached as well. So I am a big advocate, whether it's Team or another organization, each employer and each union should have some way to address crises, some way to offer support for mental health for their employees, some mechanism that they can turn to that is an objective third party that's confidential and that shows your employees that you care and that you are invested in them and in their future. Even having a benefit like this demonstrates and communicates to the employee that they are valuable and that you got their back. And so when we're talking about mental health in the worst workplace, that's a series that's coming up. We're going to talk about suicide awareness and prevention. We're going to talk about critical incident response. So how acting early and appropriately after a workplace fatality or workplace harassment or violence can help individuals diminish or avoid a trauma response and help them to get connected to resources that will help them and help them get to a place of resilience or recognize their own resilience that they have intrinsically. We're going to talk about how workplace mental health is a team sport. I've mentioned that earlier, but using the construction as an example, we all might be familiar with the term team lift, but that is where a certain lift has been deemed a team lift, meaning you don't try and lift it. It's way too heavy to try and lift by yourself. If you try and lift it by yourself, you are going to get hurt. Those of you who work in that industry probably are very familiar with a team lift. So with mental health, it's not much different. Meaning there are some things where you can lift on your own, you can reach out for those resources, but then there's some things that we are faced with in life, crises, a sudden loss, something where we can't lift the burden of that on our own. And we need a team. We need those people who care about us, those people who are around us each and every day to rally and to help us with that heavy lifting that is that mental health concern or relational issue. We're going to also talk during that series. We're going to go have an episode that's called Beneath the Surface. And this is how an employee's behavior can be a symptom of a deeper issue that, if addressed, can restore that individual to a happy and healthy contributor of the workforce, subsequently creating a loyal, lifelong employee in the process. We're also going to talk about the various hats that supervisors wear. I know whether you're a business agent at a union or a HR representative at an organization or in another supervisory role, you wear a lot of hats. Some days you may wear the hat of counselor. Some days you may wear the hat of legal advisor or financial consultant or crisis responder. These are all the different hats that supervisors wear, for better or for worse. You are the person people look to help them with their problems. And so often you are the first line of defense, or really that first phone call that people make when they are struggling. And so we want to talk about how supervisors can point people to the resources that can have some of those conversations that they may not feel equipped or legally able to have. Organizations that are an objective third party like Team, point them in direction of Team, where we can have some of those more difficult and personal conversations. And we can also consult each of the supervisors on how to have conversations themselves. And so through this podcast, we're also going to talk about health-related topics. So we're going to have a series on diet and nutrition, how you can actually look and feel younger next year. We're going to talk about diet and nutrition, not only from a physical standpoint, so talking about meal planning, different recipes, how to get your steps in, how to prepare meals in advance if you are a working professional so that you can stay away from the fast food as much as possible. So quick and easy meals. But we're also going to talk about diet and nutrition from a mental health component as well. Emotional eating, eating disorders. These are things, again, that are difficult to talk about, but so important to have those conversations and have them in a safe and non-threatening way, like on a podcast episode. We're going to do a series on complex care. So navigating the medical world while being treated for complex comorbidities. So that typically span not only medical, but also behavioral health and social challenges, all kind of rolled into one, and the complications that are associated with these, how those issues can be addressed, and what resources you can get connected to address those issues in your life or the lives of your family or the lives of your employees, if asked to do so in an appropriate way. We're going to talk a lot about identifying and processing difficult emotions. And these are emotions that all people experience. So this is one of those things where I tell anybody who wants to check out when I'm out talking in public, sometimes when somebody starts talking about anxiety or depression, even though these are things that every human being faces, the tendency is to turn off our brain and say, this bit of information doesn't apply to me. So I am not going to let anyone off the hook when they're listening to this show. And we are going to talk about how to identify and then process difficult emotions, where those patterns of inability to process difficult emotions started, and how those may show up today, and how we can reverse that in our lives. And then we're going to really draw attention to, not to us at Team, not to myself, felt it was appropriate to give some introduction, but we really at Team focus on the attention and the kindness and compassion that the employers have provided for their employees by utilizing a service like Team. So what I mean by that is the only reason Team shows up on that job site when there's a critical incident that has occurred to help people regain that sense of safety and stability and security, or when we have an individual who hasn't left their house in 6 months working remotely and a wellness check was done, and that person's house was deemed unlivable, and that really that secret shame and that secret pain was exposed in a way that they didn't choose to have it exposed. How we show up in those areas, it's not because of Team that we're there. It's because of a supervisor or business rep from the organizations that we serve that had that compassion and that awareness to reach out and subscribe to the service, and then reach out and let us know what's going on and ask for help. The only reason that we are here today is because of the organization. So I want to thank all of you who fit into that category as listeners, and those of you who don't, I want to thank you as well for listening to our show. And my hope is that you can draw from these topics and these discussions, draw some helpful information that help you down your own path towards personal wellness. With that, we are going to, again, with the purpose of drawing attention to the topics and to the organizations that we serve, we will spend time discussing a variety of occupations in discussion with representatives and key stakeholders from various occupations, trades, and other employment sectors, and then interviewing each of them in a way where we can learn about what they do, but we can hear their story. So one other thing that we're going to talk about is, again, with the industries that we serve, which are, include but aren't limited to construction unions, contractors, hospitality sector, retail food service, meat packing, infrastructure, technology, transportation, law enforcement, firefighting, finance, various corporations, both private and public, healthcare, politics, and the list can go on and on and on. So really, if you are somebody who is employed at any type of job, there is going to be useful information and hopefully quite a few aha moments as you listen to this podcast for your own lives. But you don't have to even be employed. If you are just a human being wanting to gain better insight into your own issues, struggles, relationships, whatever the case may be, you can also benefit from this show as well. So within those industries, we will spend time talking through training opportunities and provide various tools to an organization's leadership and management, including supervisors, to better equip them to address and normalize wellness in the workplace and on the job site. And we will also discuss how, as an employer, you address wellness concerns with an employee whose performance or demeanor has created an unsustainable or even unsafe working condition for themselves or the other people around them. And, through this, I can almost hear the loud amen from our human resource professionals who may be listening today. And then as a final preview, as we close out this episode, the episodes I am probably most excited about will feature individuals who want to share their own wellness stories to the audience with the hopes that their story will help somebody by using their most valuable asset, which is their story. So we all have a story that brought us to where we are today. Everything that happened during that story contributed to who we are today and how we face challenges. By demonstrating that vulnerability, the hope is that these stories will spur you on to share your own story with somebody close to you and really dig into some of those dark areas, knowing that there can be true and lasting healing on the other side. But look, I could sit here and discuss each of these topics ad nauseum, which my family would agree is not an empty threat, right, Bella?
Yes.
But what is far more powerful and persuasive is for you to hear stories not only from experts, but from real people with real stories of their real outcomes, in the hopes that you can relate in a very real and tangible way. So again, to close out this episode, personal wellness is not just about how we care for ourselves, although that is where it starts, but it is also how we care for others. So sometimes that means having conversations that are difficult, conversations that are awkward at best, and possible relationship destroying at worst, but truthful and with compassion in order to open the door for someone to get help. There is a reason this podcast is called our wellness at work and not just wellness at work. We're all in this together and no one was meant to be an island. So let's come together to break the stigma and normalize the conversations around personal wellness and workplace wellness. Let's demonstrate the courage of our own stories, of owning our own stories, including the difficult parts, and fully realize that we need to stop believing the lies that we tell ourselves every day. So that the internal dialogue or monologue that we have is constantly feeding us a mixture of positive and negative messages. As you become, as an individual struggles with negative self-talk, which we all do to some degree, those are lies that we are telling ourselves. Now, the best lie is one that's partially based in truth. So we always tend to connect it to true things in our lives. But the reality is that we tell ourselves lies every day. So examples of these lies, when you have something you're struggling with, the lie that we tell ourselves is keep it to yourself because no one cares. That's not true. Another lie that we can tell ourselves is if you talk about that, you will just be made fun of or ridiculed. Or how about the one I see that breaks my heart every single time? And it usually happens after a loss of an employee, either through accidental death, suicide, or sudden unexpected passing. And this is the employer or organization declines emotional support after the incident, citing, quote, everyone seems fine and it doesn't look like any of them need any other support at this time. The reason this breaks my heart is because it is often the reason that everyone seems fine is because of the stigma that exists. And they may be demonstrating an internal desire to not be ridiculed or seen as weak. So that whole pick yourself up by your bootstraps, you can do this on your own. Asking for help is a weakness, not a strength. These are all lies that we tell ourselves when the reality is it is incredibly strong of a person to reach out for help when they need it. It's the opposite of that weakness. It's incredibly strong to face a awkward yet important topic head on without deflecting with humor. Although deflection with humor is a useful tool in some situations. But we want to change that message. And for those employers and for anybody showing up in these circumstances, we want to give them a chance to provide that support. And when given the chance in these situations, even if people seem like they're fine and nobody needs that support, you don't know what's going on beneath the surface of that person. So give them a chance and provide an opportunity and open the door for them to have that conversation if they are ready and desire to do so. And the reality is you're not going to always know who those people are that are struggling the worst. By bringing us in when we address these situations, we are scanning the audience. We may address a group for 5 to 10 minutes and talk about the different ways they may be responding, but also ways we can honor the memory of the person who passed away. But at the same time, we are scanning the room to see each and every person's eyes and their emotional response to what we're talking about as a way to pull them aside and have a private but pointed conversation about what they may be going through and in the hopes that they can get the help that they need. So whether you think your employees need it or not, it is always, always, always a good thing to bring in support after something has threatened the stability or that sense of safety, whatever the case may be. All right. So as promised, to close here, the final thing we're going to do today, as promised, I'm going to leave you with a tool to help with the day-to-day stress and anxiety that you can use this tool anytime and any place. And it is called Foursquare Breathing. And so I'm going to need Bella to help me out with this. Bella, we've done this before, but do you remember this? Is this new? Okay. Yeah. So this is going to be a perfect opportunity. You guys are going to listen while I teach Bella Foursquare Breathing. And this is a in the moment meditation trick that anybody can use at any time. Now, I want to pause there for a moment because I know as soon as I said the word meditation, all you ultra masculine listeners may have scoffed, turned off this podcast, might not even be listening anymore. But I will note that this particular exercise is taught to all Navy SEALs and is used as a sniper technique to steady themselves before taking the shot. So if you consider yourself to be at least equal in masculinity to Navy SEAls, there's no excuse not to at least listen to this and try it out. But this is for everybody. This is just a really great way to get control of your heartbeat, your breathing, and essentially calm yourself down in the midst of anxiety, stress, panic attack. This is a helpful tool. It's not a cure-all, but it is a helpful tool. And I've taught this to a lot of people who have come back and said, hey, I use that often and it is really helpful. And so Foursquare Breathing, it is exactly what it sounds like. You are going to, Bella, you're going to, when we start this, you are going to breathe in through your nose for a 4 count. So for roughly 4 seconds. You're going to then hold your breath for 4 seconds with that same breath that you inhaled for 4 seconds. Mm-hmm. Then you are going to take 4 seconds. Are you following me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Then you're going to take 4 seconds to exhale. So, I don't want to blow into the microphone, but you're going to exhale for a count of 4. And then you are going to, this is the hardest part. This is especially for any of you listeners who may be smokers. This might be challenging, or just in general, know that you don't have to do a 4 count. If a 3 count is all you can get to, that's okay too. But the final step is you are going to exhale and completely hold your lungs with no air in them for 4 seconds. So it's 4, 4, 4, 4. That's why it's the Foursquare breathing. And we are going to give this a shot. So I'm gonna be the one counting. Bella, you're gonna do the inhaling through your nose for a 4 count, and then hold it for 4, exhale for 4, and then no air in your lungs for 4 seconds. You ready? Mm-hmm. Okay. Go. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000. Exhale. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000. No air in your lungs. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, and relax. I probably counted a little fast there, but I didn't want to leave you hanging. How are you feeling? Good. So you won't get it always with one try. I recommend doing a few of those in a row. But if you are in the midst of anxiety symptoms, stress, agitation, even works really well with anger, it gives you a chance to center yourself, to slow down, and to allow the physical response of relaxation to kick in. You can use this anytime in any place. You can be out at a restaurant and feel that anxiety creeping up and just excuse yourself to the restroom, go into one of the stalls. You can do it there. You can do it in your car. Just don't close your eyes for the meditation part. If you are in your vehicle, there's just a really no limit to where you can implement this tool. Each time that we have an episode, we'll leave you with more helpful tools to get you through the day to day. But what I want to leave you with right now, please join us next time for our beginning of our family series. We're looking forward to really getting to know you, spending this time with you. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.